About 14 years ago, I listened to a interview that was done between Tony Robbins and Pete Sisko. Does anybody know who Tony Robbins is? Nobody. Wow. Okay. He's probably would be considered one of the leading success coaches in the world, personal coaches in the world. Phenomenal if you ever get a chance to listen to him, whether it's on audio or you get to go see him in person. He's a big proponent of immersing yourself in whatever it is you want to learn. Go learn from the best of the best. And that's what he does. And that's why he was interviewing Pete Sisko. And one of the things that they were talking about was a very specific style of lifting that they said a few things that really hit home with me. One was that you could lift this very specific style of lifting. And Pete said that him and his partner were off lecturing, and it had been 6 months since they were able to lift together. They got back, they got lifting, and they were like, oh, we're going to have to kind of start from scratch again. And they set personal records for most of their lifts. I was like, that's really interesting, because that wasn't far after when I played basketball in college. My senior season, I probably spent 6 months working really, really hard to get to a full range bench press of 315 pounds. A month and a half into the season, when you're not lifting and you kind of get away from that, I probably lost 100 pounds of that. I was probably down to like 225. So I just killed myself, and I lose so much of it. And they're spending 6 months away from it and setting personal records. That completely blew my mind. So that kind of, one, because I followed a lot of Tony Robbins stuff to begin with and have a lot of trust in what he's doing and what he talks about. Two, because that was kind of hitting home with things that I already knew. It made me really interested in getting a piece of equipment that they had at the time that would allow people to lift like this. They also were talking about strength gains that were off the charts more than anything I had ever seen before. So, is that even possible? And one of the things that you'll see is that when you're lifting through a full range of motion, is that, let's say with a bench press, you come down here. This is a weaker position for the AC joint. You can't push as much weight in this particular part of the range of that motion, and it's the most chance that you're going to have to hurt yourself. So what the idea basically is an isometric lift from roughly your strongest range of motion, which isn't completely locked out and on your skeleton, 2 inches back, about 120-degree bend, but it's an all-out effort, everything that you can do. Typically, you can do about double here what you can do here. And that's part of the point. If I could do 500 pounds from here versus 250 here, it's a totally different stimulus into the muscle. And the body responds that way. Obviously, the body's going to respond in a much more incredible way with 500 pounds of tension versus 250 pounds of tension. So, listening to all this stuff, it made me really excited. I bought one of those pieces of equipment, and I used it in the office with people for a long time. Another thing that really struck home with me was some research studies that they had talked about. Two in particular. One was a group of professional power lifters, and usually in the professional world, you're kind of close to a peak of what you can do, and you're making very tiny incremental gains when you're at that level. They talked about how they would do 1 rep and 10 rep maxes to start, full range traditional lifting. They lifted this way for 10 weeks, and then they came back and did 1 rep and 10 rep maxes again. Their 1 rep maxes were up about 28%, and their 10 rep maxes were up 35%, which for pros is so far off the charts that it's like benching from 300 to 400 pounds in 10 weeks for people who have really been working on this stuff. The other group of people were just your average individual, didn't really work out a lot, and their average gains were 80%. What I had seen in my office is what a lot of people would go somewhere between doubling and tripling their lifts in a 12-week period of time. I had one woman, she's 82 years old, her leg press went from 237 pounds to 673 pounds in 12 weeks. For an 82-year-old, that's the difference of walking up and down stairs. That's the difference. It's a big difference in the quality of life at that point. Not to mention, when you're going to get those big strength gains and the stimulus to the muscle, you're going to get muscle growth. And when you get muscle growth, you're automatically burning fat, even when you're sleeping. You're automatically burning sugar even when you're sleeping. So think of the implications from a diabetic standpoint. Because you're getting such high loads into the muscles of what that body's capable of, simple Wolff's Law. You put stress on a bone, it's going to grow and get stronger. So you're going to get, potentially big help with osteopenia and osteoporosis type issues. You're going to get massive improvements in the ligamentous integrity and tendinous integrity in the body, which is huge. Some things that we'll talk about later. So the gains have been there for years and years and years. And the time came, 2015, 2014 at this point, and I'm going to Kona for the Ironman World Championships. Call up Pete Cisco, I have a consult with him, say, I've got your machine, I've had the best gains of my life using it, but every time I touch the thing, 6 weeks later I'm up 15 pounds, and it's not usually so good for a 140-mile race to be carrying around an extra 15 or 20 pounds. He's like, I understand what you're saying. We're going to change some things up, but you can't use your machine. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, instead of what we would typically do is a 10-second all-out lift, one time per muscle group to create that stimulus, he wanted me to do 3-minute-long isometric lifts. But there was no technology on the planet that could actually measure a 3-minute-long isometric. The only number you could ever get was on a little digital meter, and you'd get the peak number. You're pushing, you might have hit 300 and 340 and 450. You'll just get that top number at the end of it after 10 seconds. And you'll see that number constantly going up. But at the same time, if you're doing something for 3 minutes, what's going on during that entire 3-minute period of time? It's like you can't use that machine. So instead, he had me doing 2 to 4 inch reps. It's not quite isometric. They're tiny reps, but at least it was something to measure on top of it. So if you could do 100 pounds, 100 times, that's 10,000 pounds. Does that make sense? Okay. So, we do all that, but over the next 2 years afterwards, I actually took it upon myself to spend an absolutely ridiculous amount of money hiring mechanical engineers and software engineers and electrical engineers and creating the technology to actually do that. And it's been a lot of fun. It's done, and it's creating better gains than I've ever seen. I'm the only person on the planet that's ever had 3-minute-long lifts from an isometric perspective and be able to measure all of it. And just as an example, I created, as part of the equipment, instead of a traditional squat where you've got a bar on your shoulder going through that full range, what do people complain about doing a squat like that? Especially if you have a lot of weight on the bar. It hurts. The neck, shoulders, you got pads, you got all sorts of stuff. You get a lot of weight up there, there's also a level of compression on the spine. You might already have a hint of how awesome my back is at this point, but I don't want to create a lot of extra pressure on my spine. So I created, as a part of this gym, this universal piece in the middle with the load cell so that I can put a squat belt on at the waist, attach in, and be able to do a full squat as hard as I can without any of the compression on the spine. Okay. So what I had done was, it's the first time I'd ever even been able to do a squat like that because it wasn't part of the original machine doing squats. So the peak, I'll tell you the peaks first. I went roughly from 450, 750, 850, 950, and 1050 pounds over those intervals. It was between 2 and 3 weeks in between each of those lifts for 3 minutes. So those are the peaks that I hit during the 3-minute period for each of those. Then you add up the totals. Day 1 was 26,000 pounds in 3 minutes. Same 3 minutes, I went to 44,000 pounds, 82,000 pounds, and 117,000 pounds. But I can measure that now. So now I know that not only is my peak power that I can produce in my legs, but I can actually sustain that for a much longer period of time. And it's creating tremendous benefits that really cross over, up over 60 watts on my bike that I can sustain for an hour. That's a really big deal in the biking world. And there's virtually, you could do any exercise that you could possibly think of. The gain, it's not just localized to that belt squat. Every lift is going up significantly like that. I've even been able to wear straps on my foot and on my hand, having a cross crawl pattern like you're running. Tibialis anterior, hip flexors through the core, in that running posture, and doing that, and similar results, obviously less weight than a full-out squat, but huge going up every single time with that, peak and totals. And those totals have never been available before on the planet at all until just recently. So that's really exciting and a lot of fun. The couple of beautiful pieces on that is that, one, it's incredibly safe. There's a 5,000-pound load cell built into the equipment, so you never have to put on tons of plates, take off plates, all the time that's involved with that, possibly dropping them. There's really no chance of dropping anything on yourself. Or if you're doing a bench press and you've got 450 pounds, it's never going to end up on your neck. It's not possible. So it saves a lot of time from that perspective, and there's a lot of safety things. 2, you're always in your safest and strongest range of motion. If you're going to get hurt doing a bench, it's going to be down here. It's not going to be when you're here. And the efficiency of it, almost everybody does 10-second long all-out lifts, and it sounds a lot easier than it actually really is when you're going all out. Most people have no idea. When you talk about high-intensity exercise and maximum whatever, nobody has a really good conscious understanding of what it means to push a muscle to its absolute max for 10 seconds. It's kind of a unique feel when you get used to it. So just the efficiency of it. Typically, there's 10 major exercises that you'll do to hit the whole body. 5 exercises one week, most of your pushes. B workout the next week will be most of your pulling exercises, and alternating every other week. When you don't go up in 3 of the 5, typically you add more time because you haven't actually recovered from your last lift. Why would you lift if you're actually weaker than the last time? It doesn't make sense. So just the efficiency of it. If you really look at 10 seconds times 5 exercises, you're truly at 50 seconds of all-out effort. By the time you move the machine around and you're talking and doing whatever, you might be 5 or 10 minutes a week getting bigger gains than anybody's ever had throughout their entire athletic career. And I can say that when I was at the ICAK National Convention in D.C., a student from what chiropractic college is near Kansas City? Cleveland. This guy's name is Ryan. He played in the NFL for 4 years. He was a lineman. It's like 330 pounds, 6'4", massive guy. If you looked him next to me, you'd say Ryan would destroy you in every lift. Your bench, your deadlift, your squat, your leg press, and he couldn't touch any of my lifts. But it's not meant to just brag about that. His starting place was better than where my starting place ever was. But he's never trained his high-end capability in a safe way. He's always had to pick lifts that could go through a full range, which automatically means you're using a lighter weight to go through your weaker ranges of motion. And when you focus on your strongest ranges of motion with the most that you could possibly do, the body responds in a way that's incredible. Yes. And muscle contraction is an all or nothing response. You're either firing a muscle fiber or you're not. So now the key that I think actually propels it to another level is when you're going all out, running, all those muscle groups, let's say that all muscle groups have 10 motor units that make it fire. When you're running, you might be firing 3 or 4 motor units. That's very submaximal. Even when you're sprinting, you're still submaximal on what those muscles are really capable of, right? So now, because you're going completely all out, everything that you could possibly do, your brain is figuring out how to actually fire every motor unit that you've got. And you're getting that full firing of the muscle more than you've ever been able to do in any other way. And it's all about the stimulus to the nervous system and the muscle that makes the body have to grow and respond. You go backwards a little bit in time, 1979-ish, Mike Mentzer, he won Mr. Olympia. He was kind of competing against Schwarzenegger. Schwarzenegger won in 80, Mentzer won in 79. He was huge in the world of the science behind bodybuilding. And what he said time and time again, especially when he was training all of his people, was that there comes a point in time where you've met the stimulus required to create growth. Once you've met the stimulus and you continue beyond that, now you're just making it harder on your body to recover. Okay? So almost all of his lifting was a combination of very, very, very slow up isometric lift and then very, very slow lift on the way down. He would only do one set, typically 6 to 8 reps to complete exhaustion to get that level of just stimulus to the body to make it and force it to grow. But you can take that a whole step further with a straight isometric lift and push that muscle as hard as it could possibly be pushed. You've given it the stimulus that it needs. And the beauty is you don't walk around for the next week, sore off your rocker, and can't do anything. Even surprisingly, it surprised myself, a 3-minute isometric lift, I'm not walking around sore and like, oh my God, that was horrible. For the first month of doing that, the 2 days following it, I almost felt like I was air hungry and just physically fatigued. Almost like I had wiped out every piece of ATP that I had in the body, and I'm just exhausted, and it was a level of fatigue, but it wasn't pain, it wasn't soreness, and now I'm to the point where I could do that lift, and the next day, I know academically that I shouldn't kill it the next day, but I could get a solid workout in the next day. And even though, despite the fail, 117,000 pounds versus 26,000 pounds, I'm 350% more that I could do, but I can actually recover from that the next day and be able to do something as well, which I would argue is actually creating changes in the way the body is even expressing its own DNA and what's going on in the body as a result. So kind of neat. A lot's gone into that. Kind of took a spin off of this idea of a maximal contraction creating weakness. It's like, well, what if it doesn't create weakness? The maximal a true max contraction, that it actually can have the exact opposite effect, create incredible strength gains, incredible muscle gain. Not to mention the fact that when you're getting anabolic growth in the body, growth hormone levels are going to go up, testosterone levels are going to go up, you're going to get blood sugar decreases, you're going to get all sorts of good things going on. So it can be, very, very beneficial from that perspective as well. And safe. Like I said, when are you ever going to get an 85 or a 90-year-old to go spend 6 extra hours lifting weights in the gym? Probably not too often. If they're in the office and you get, 5 minutes and they don't even have to change their clothes and they can get that in and see tremendous gains and they stay motivated, it's not, oh crap, I go to the gym, this sucks. It's, all right, last time I had 430 pounds, I'm going to beat that today. Like, it's motivational just to try to beat your previous numbers. It's really kind of neat from that perspective as well.